welcome to part 2, doing a bit more on fitting 3-point linkage onto the Unimog 411. So in the last part, we fitted all the mechanical parts, the lift arm, the hydraulic rams, and the brackets for the bottom linkage as well. So in this episode, what I'm going to start to do is fit the hydraulic pipes and see if we can get it actually operational. So I think next thing to try is actually putting the linkage on the back before we start working on the hydraulics and see whether it all goes together okay. There you go, simple as that, it's on. So just put a drawbar on here for the time being. Obviously top link would go on there if I'm using an implement on the back. So on these check links, there's this triangular fabrication here. And the idea with that is if you are using an implement where you want it to be no swing on the implement side to side, and if we loosen this off, yeah, we can soon have some free movement. And usually, you know, on the road, you wouldn't want that to happen. You certainly wouldn't want to watch it happen with a drawbar. So if the triangle is this way up and these chains are tensioned, it remains in tension evenly wherever it is in terms of elevation when you lift the 3-point linkage. If you turn these triangular frames over, it changes the geometry. Rather than pivoting here, it starts to pivot around this point. And that means it's in tension when it's elevated, but there's free movement when it's down. So a lot of cultivating implements, so things like a plough, that wants to be able to move laterally when it's in the ground, but you don't want it doing that when you've lifted it up and you're traveling on the road with it. So that allows you to, without having to adjust these tensions manually each time, just by lifting or dropping, changes the tensions on the check chains. So I ordered some hydraulic hoses a few days ago. There's some hydraulic hoses with the kit, but they're only there to allow you to join up 2 cylinders in parallel, so they work together. What isn't in the kit is hoses to get from the spool valve to the cylinders at the back. So this is what I've ordered here. I think the kit assumes that you've already got a hydraulic system on your Unimog, but it's pretty straightforward to order hydraulic hoses for what you might want. One trick, I don't know if it's a trick really, but sometimes measuring the length of hydraulic hoses, just using a tape measure doesn't work very well. It tends to fold. Even if you use a piece of string and things, it won't lie like a hose lies and allow for kind of where you need flexibility or where it's got to travel around something. So I keep a bit of old garden hose, which has similar characteristics to the way it bends and things to a hydraulic hose, and I just run that from the start to the finish of where I want a hose and then measure the garden hose afterwards, and that I found gives me a much more accurate length of hose for what I then order. So if we have a look around the vehicle a moment, there's the changeover valve. This is BSP. It was one that was readily available at a reasonable price. So rather than try and find a metric one, I went for a BSP one, and I'll just use adapters in the end here. Hoses that come with the kit I've already fitted. So we need to fit hoses to cater for 2 hydraulic circuits. One is a shared circuit. It powers the lift rams to elevate the frame and bring the linkage up, but it also powers a tipper ram through this hose Obviously I don't want them both working at the same time, so that's what the changeover valve is for. Is one way will be for the tipper and the other way will be for the linkage. And you can interchange between them, so if I want to tip sideways on this while I've got something on the linkage, that's still possible to do. Second hydraulic circuit though is to push down on the 3-point linkage cylinders. The ram doesn't need that, it just uses gravity to force the hydraulic fluid back to the hydraulic tank under the bonnet at the front. Whereas we can push down on these cylinders, so that's a powered circuit, so we need to put in the pipe work for that. So if we take a look under the bonnet, what we've got is this is the hydraulic tank where the hydraulic fluid is kept. That's a return hose, and then there's a pickup hose right down at the bottom there. And then we've got the spool valve, the control valve for the hydraulics. At the moment I've only got one hose connected, that's for the tipper, and it's just to elevate. As I say, it's not powered down. I will need to use this port here on the spool valve. That will be the powered down for the 3-point linkage. So I've got some hoses from here down along the chassis, under here to the changeover valve. So let's see whether the hoses I've ordered are the right length with the right fittings. See if we can find out. So all the hoses are now in. So this hose feed is for pushing the 3-point linkage downwards, goes into this end of the cylinders. For pushing the linkage up is this feed here. It goes into back of the cylinders, a pair of them. That in turn is connected to a changeover tap. When it's this way, when the lever's over this way, it feeds the 3-point linkage ram, and when it's over the position it's in now, the hydraulic fluid goes around this way and to the tipper ram. And then we've got two hoses which I need to secure and things. They're not properly, need P-clips or something to secure them, but at the moment they run to the front to the spool valve. And in the cab, these are the levers that control the spool valve. This one doesn't do anything at the moment, that's the spare spool. This one is for the 3-point linkage and for the tipper. And there's a rod. You can just see these run down to the spool valve to control them. So the next thing is to try it. So this valve there, just gravity's bringing that back down. So that's forcing fluid all the way back round to the hydraulic tank at the front. So there's no real weight in that tipper bed, and by the time it gets to the last ram, it's actually pretty slow to come down, but it does get there eventually. So now the tipper bed is down, I'll change the changeover lever, we'll start it up, and we'll see if the linkage works. Probably time to give it a real test. So I'm going to put a quick hitch on the back, and then we'll try putting actually some load on the 3-point linkage. Well, it's on, it's fitted, and as you can see, it's working. I suppose one question is it worth it? It is a really expensive kit. Well, I think it's an expensive kit. I think in terms of the utility it adds to the vehicle, I've now got effectively an additional tractor. No power takeoff yet, but 3-point linkage means it can now do all sorts of jobs, particularly with the tipper as well, that it couldn't do before. So I've got a backup now for the 421. They can start to have similar jobs. Obviously this will tend to do smaller, lighter jobs, but still it's transformed it into a very useful vehicle. In terms of doing the conversion, it's pretty straightforward. If you had a Unimog 411 that didn't have a spool valve, some didn't come with the spool valves, it's going to be a bit more involved. You're not going to have a hydraulic pump, you're not going to have valves to control the 3-point linkage. So you'd have to rig something else up to be able to use 3-point linkage on the machine. The same would be true on a 421 as well. But for me, in terms of wanting to be able to, not only own the vehicle as an enthusiast, but be able to use it for what it was designed for, well worth making the conversion. So for me, basically it gets a thumbs up.